The first thing I learned about humans was that they were soft, not metaphorically, not culturally, physically, structurally, undeniably soft. Our xenobiologists had documented it in their very first survey reports when we made contact with Earth. They had circulated photographs. I had seen them myself, as a young officer leafing through the intelligence briefings aboard my first assignment. A human without protective covering was just a sack of water held together by something that tore if you pushed hard enough. No exoskeletal layer, no reinforced musculature. Their bones, pale and brittle-looking, broke under pressures that would barely inconvenience a juvenile of my own kind. I remember laughing at those photographs, not cruelly, just the way you laugh when something surprises you with how fragile it is. My name is Vorith. I am a senior warden of the Keth Collective, and I have spent 32 cycles enforcing order across 14 star systems. I have subdued creatures that could tear hull plating with their hands. I have walked away from combat situations that left my unit's medical officer speechless. I am considered among my kind to be exceptionally capable. I want you to understand that before I tell you what happened in the detention corridor of Waystation Merak, I want you to understand exactly what I thought I was before the human named Aldric Solen corrected me. The station had been under contested jurisdiction for 6 cycles. Trade disputes, factional disagreements between the Merak locals and 2 different Keth-aligned trading groups. The kind of low-grade political friction that produces occasional violence and keeps wardens employed. I had been dispatched with a team of 4 to maintain order during the arbitration period. Standard assignment, nothing that should have required any particular attention. Aldric Solen arrived on a freight hauler from the inner system, listed on the manifest as a cargo consultant. We flagged him at intake for a secondary screening. Not because we suspected anything specific. Humans were rare at Merak. Curiosity, more than anything. He was unremarkable in the way that humans often are when viewed by someone who does not know what they are looking at. Medium height by human standards. Lean though not visibly muscled. Dark hair going gray at the edges. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been hit before and had not particularly minded. When we told him he would need to wait for secondary processing, he just nodded and sat down. I noted him as low risk in my report. My second officer, a Keth named Vorel, was the one who actually ran the deep scan. He came to find me afterward with an expression I had not seen on him before. "Warden," he said, "you should look at this." The scan had flagged anomalies in the human structural data, not weapons, not contraband. The system had found them because it did not know what to make of them. Aldric Solen had 41 separate healed fracture sites in his skeletal structure. 41. His left forearm had been broken and healed 3 distinct times. His right hand showed evidence of damage so repeated that the bone had thickened visibly in response, the way a tree grows around a wound. His spine showed compression damage consistent with impacts I did not want to calculate. Both his orbital ridges showed old breaks that had reset imperfectly. Vorel pointed at the readout. "This is a single lifespan?" I looked at the scan for a long time. "Flag him," I said. "Hold him for the full inquiry period." We put him in interview room 2, a standard facility chamber. Reinforced walls, a table bolted to the floor, ambient lighting designed to be uncomfortable over long periods. I had conducted thousands of interviews in rooms like that one. I was not particularly interested in this one. When I entered, Aldric Solen was sitting with his elbows on the table, looking at nothing. He glanced up when I came in and gave a faint nod. Not hostile, not anxious. Just noting my arrival the way you note that a door has opened. I sat across from him and put his scan on the table between us. 41 fracture sites, I said. He looked at the scan, then back at me. "That a lot for a human? I would like you to explain them." He leaned back slightly. "That would take a while. We have time." He looked at the ceiling for a moment. "First 3 or 4 are from when I was a kid, couple more from basic training. Most of the rest from about 8 years in combat deployment. A few from after, during contract work." He looked back at me. "I'm not a dangerous person if that's what you're asking. I'm just old." He said it with complete calm, not boasting, not performing. The way someone might tell you the year they were born. I left him in the room and spent the next hour pulling every available record on Aldric Solen. The combat deployment alone took an hour to read through. Not because the records were detailed, because what they described required me to read each line more than once to make certain I had understood it correctly. I called Vorel into my office before the second interview. "His unit," I said, and I set the translated records on the desk between us. 18 months of continuous engagement on a disputed colony world. No rotation, no relief period. Vorel looked at the records. What were the casualty figures? 63% of his unit. In the first 8 months. Vorel said nothing. He was captured twice, I said. The first time he was held for 11 days. The records on what was done to him during those 11 days are incomplete, but what is there indicates repeated structural trauma. I paused. When he was extracted, the medical report notes that he refused sedation during treatment. He said he wanted to stay awake. Why? The report doesn't say. He was asked and he said, quote, "I don't like not knowing what's happening to me." Vorel looked at the scan image again, at all those white lines where bone had broken and grown back. He looked at it for a long time. He said he was just old, Vorel said. Yes, what do you want to do? I thought about it. There was nothing in the records that justified continued detention. No criminal history, no threat profile that our risk systems would recognize, just a man who had been hurt an extraordinary number of times and had, apparently, simply continued existing. Release him, I said. Standard processing. Apologize for the delay, and if he's involved in the factional dispute, then we will deal with that if it arises. It arose. On the 4th day of the arbitration period, one of the Murek-aligned factions attempted to take 3 of the arbitration staff hostage in the lower trade annex. They had 6 armed members and they moved fast. Our response team was on the opposite end of the station. I was 4 minutes away when the alert came through. Aldric Solen was not. He had apparently been in the annex buying transit documentation when the faction members moved in. The surveillance record of what happened next was recovered later, and I have watched it more times than I can count. He did not run. He did not hide. He stood up from the documentation counter and looked at the 6 armed faction members with a flat expression that I can only describe as assessing. The way someone looks at a problem they are deciding whether or not to address. The faction leader, a large local named Preth, crossed the floor and hit him, hard, in the ribs. The impact was visible on the surveillance audio as a sharp crack. The biometric data we pulled later showed the fracture occurring in real time. 1 rib, clean break, right side. Aldric Solen made a sound, not a scream, more like a controlled exhale. He put his hand against the counter and straightened up. Preth hit him again in the same spot. The second crack was louder. The biometric data showed a second rib breaking, fracture parallel to the first. Aldric Solen breathed. Just breathed, deliberately. Like he was doing it on purpose, practicing it. Preth said something to him that the audio did not capture clearly. Then he hit him a 3rd time. I have thought about this moment more than any other in that surveillance record. The 3rd impact landed. The 3rd rib broke, not cleanly this time. The biometric data later showed a displacement fracture, which the station medical team told me was significantly more painful than a clean break. Aldric Solen stood there with 3 broken ribs and he breathed. Then his expression changed. I cannot describe the change precisely. Something left it, some quality that I had interpreted as calm. It had not been calm. I understand that now. It had been patience, and the patience ran out. What happened in the next 48 seconds was reviewed by the station security board 3 separate times. I will describe it as plainly as I can. Aldric Solen pushed off the counter and hit Preth with the heel of his open hand directly under the jaw. Preth was a large local, nearly twice the human's mass, and the impact lifted him off his footing. Before Preth had landed, Solen had already moved to the nearest faction member on his left, a young one with a restraint baton, and he took the baton, not wrestled it away, took it, the way you take something from a person who does not yet know they are giving it to you, the baton across the back of the knee. The 2nd faction member went down. The 3rd had a firearm. I have watched this portion of the recording many times and I still am not completely certain I understand the geometry of what happened. Solen moved into the firearm rather than away from it. He controlled the weapon with one hand while his other elbow made contact with the bearer's throat. The firearm did not discharge. The 4th and 5th faction members came from opposite sides. Solen dealt with one by doing something to their wrist that our medical team described afterward as technically a dislocation but also something else. The 5th caught him across the already injured ribs with a strike. He made the same controlled exhale sound and kept moving. The 6th faction member ran. Solen walked, not ran, to where the 3 hostages were being held by Preth, who was still on the floor. He helped them up, said something to them. One of the arbitration staff said later that his exact words were, "Sorry about the wait, "There's a medical team coming." When my team arrived 4 minutes and 22 seconds after the alert, we found 5 of 6 faction members immobilized, the hostages unharmed, and Aldric Solen sitting on the floor with his back against the trade counter. His face was completely without expression. One of my officers called for medical. Solen looked up. "I'm fine," he said. My officer said, "Sir, you have 3 broken ribs?" Solen looked down at his own chest as if checking this information against his internal records. "Yeah," he said, "I know. I sat with him in the medical bay while the station physician worked. Not because protocol required it, because I needed to understand something and I did not know how to ask." The physician kept saying things to him. Standard medical commentary, the sort of language designed to be reassuring. Solen kept responding in monosyllables that were not rude, just minimal. He was not interested in being reassured. I watched his face while she worked. He was not performing composure, he was simply composed. Whatever internal response he had to pain was not registering in any way I could identify, except occasionally in the slight tension around his eyes, which would appear, and then he would do something deliberate and controlled with his breathing, and it would disappear. He noticed me watching him do this. "Slow exhale," he said. "Tricks the nervous system, takes the edge off." "You have been doing this a long time," I said. He looked at the wall. "Since I was about 22. How old are you now?" 47. 25 years of learning to breathe through structural damage. I thought about that. I thought about the 41 fracture sites. I thought about the 11 days in captivity and the refusal of sedation. "In the annex," I said, "after the first 2 strikes, you waited." He looked at me. "You let him hit you a 3rd time," I said. "You could have moved. The surveillance record shows you had the space. You chose to remain stationary." He was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't sure yet," he said. "Of what? Whether I needed to end it or just stop it." He paused. "Stopping it is cleaner, better for everyone. Ending it makes more paperwork." I stared at him. "The 3rd one told me what I needed to know," he said, "about what they were willing to do. After that, stopping it wasn't going to be enough." He had let a man break 3 of his ribs, deliberately, to gather information. "That's insane," I said, and I said it without thinking, which is not how a senior warden speaks to a civilian. Aldric Solen smiled for the first time since I had met him. Just faintly. "Probably," he said. "I filed my report that evening. Factual. Detailed. I reviewed it twice before sending it because the language kept coming out wrong. Kept sounding like I was describing something impossible instead of something I had witnessed." I pulled out the xenobiology briefing I had laughed at as a young officer. The photographs of human anatomy, the fragility assessments, the bone density charts, the impact tolerance ratings, all of it was technically accurate. Every measurement was correct. What the briefing had not said, could not have said, was anything about what a human chose to do with that fragility. Our species are built for damage tolerance. We are dense, we are layered, we are, by measurable physical criteria, far more durable than a human being. When we are struck, we absorb. When we are hit, we endure. We are built that way, the way a wall is built thick. Aldric Solen was not a wall. He was something that had been hit so many times it had learned to move with the impact, to read the impact, to make decisions inside the pain that I could not make from outside it. He carried 41 healed breaks like a record of lessons. Each one had taught him something, and the teaching had continued. I thought about the expression on his face when the patience ran out. Something leaves a creature when it decides it is done waiting. I have seen that in predators. I have seen it in combat veterans of my own kind, warriors who have spent decades in conflict. There is a particular quality to the stillness that precedes serious action. I have learned to recognize it. I had not recognized it in him. Because I had been watching the wrong thing. I had been watching his body, assessing his fragility, calculating the damage he was sustaining. I had not been watching his eyes. He left Waystation Murak 2 days later on the next available freight hauler. I was at the dock when he boarded. I do not fully know why. Professional courtesy, perhaps, or something else that I had not yet found a name for. He nodded at me the way he had nodded when I entered the interview room, noting my presence, acknowledging it without ceremony. "Safe transit," I said. "Thanks," he said, and then, after a pause, "You're good at your job." It was a simple sentence, straightforward, delivered without apparent subtext. I have thought about it more than I have thought about almost anything else from that assignment. He had been in that annex. He had watched us arrive. He had watched me assess the scene, coordinate the response, manage the aftermath. He had formed a professional opinion about me based on observed performance. He had evaluated me. That thought stayed with me through the rest of the assignment, through the transit home, through the debriefing and the filing and the months that followed. A creature with 41 healed fractures and 25 years of practiced breathing had watched me do my job and found it adequate. I revised my assessment of humans sometime during the transit home. Not as a formal report, just a private revision, in the way you update a belief when reality has made the old version untenable. Soft? Yes. Every measurement confirmed, every photograph accurate, but I had been measuring the wrong thing. All those years ago, sitting in a briefing room laughing at photographs, what I had been failing to account for was what they chose to do anyway. The freight hauler's running lights were the last thing visible as it cleared the docking ring. I watched until they were gone. Somewhere out in that dark, a man with 3 freshly healing ribs was sitting in a cargo hold, breathing slowly and deliberately, and thinking whatever thoughts a creature like that thinks when it is between one thing and the next. I still wonder what those thoughts sound like. I suspect I would not fully understand them. I am no longer certain that is because they are beyond me. I think it may be because I have simply never had to think them,